So welcome, guys. Glad we are here today. We're going to be discussing emerging data and AI trends for 2025. So twice a year we compiling the list of the most emerging trends and tools and trying to classify them based on maturity to help enterprises navigate this ever-growing complex ecosystem of tools and trends. It's not getting easier. It's continuously getting harder to actually get to know what works and what doesn't work in real life. So we're gonna try today discuss what's upcoming and what do you think about infrastructure, generative AI, data platforms, ML. So let's start with generative AI, the hot topic of today. We've seen last 18 months, customers started moving from implementing chatbots, simple chatbots, and moving into solutions that support their decision-making, trying to integrate AI in their workflows. Mos, how do you see this evolution from your perspective, and what are the hottest trends in that area?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think there are a few, let's say, sides to the same question. One is about the whole evolution of all the large language models. I mean, we have seen, the whole hype came with the ChatGPT 3.5, then we had GPT-4, then 4.0 came, which was much faster. Then we have now these days DeepSeek R1, we have all the new models coming. I think what mattered last year was with kind of new models coming, especially the evolution between 3.5 and 4, or 4.0 specifically. We could see a difference in results and the kind of things you can do. And that impacted also the clients, let's say, because some things which were not possible before because of small context length of the smaller GPT models was possible after that, like the whole file-based kind of chats became a reality. But let's say from 4.0 and forward, I mean, the new models are coming, it makes a big boom always on the media, but the impact we see for the clients is not so big at the moment, let's say, for the kind of use cases they have. So let's say DeepSeek R1 is important from maybe a political perspective or like the impact on the economy, but from like what kind of things technologically can do, it was not like a drastic change for the kind of use cases which are, let's say, ready to go to production. Of course, for research topics, it matters. The same thing kind of with 01 and 03, maybe impacting much more the science than industry. So kind of the hype is now not on what's the next LLM and should I just switch to it now that the new one is out. It's more about what kind of use cases I can make with them. And I think we are going a little bit back to the roots of, the clean data is needed, data engineering was forgotten and it's coming back, governance, which was forgotten and was almost like non-existent for unstructured data is coming. So we have to think now with clients, with industries, how to get the benefit from LLMs without chasing the latest, by focusing on use cases and data.
Yes. So exactly, we've seen that industry or enterprises was focused so far on structured data, data warehouses, ERPs, frankly neglecting the entire ecosystem of unstructured data. How do you see this data management change and challenge?
Yeah, so kind of the trend we had the last 10 years before the start of, let's say, the whole Gen AI hype. And by the way, when I say hype, it's not just a hype that actually works, but I mean, of course, the media makes it a hype. Was that all of the structured data needs governance, needs data validation, and it's proper pipelining, but then no one was thinking about all the unstructured data. So LLMs came, people started to use unstructured data, but what is becoming very visible is there's almost zero governance or very little governance on these kind of things. I think you depend on the users to secure their files on the SharePoint, and if they keep it open, now it's available to the whole company, which is very different from a database. It was managed by an IT team with proper security and governance in place probably, or that was the target if they didn't have it. The unstructured data is a bit late, but very necessary to approach this problem right now. Also, one thing is maybe when you have structured data, things are somehow organized, you can still have a lot of mess. With unstructured data is created on the fly, and like the amount of, let's say, dirt data can grow over time. So someone just wants to create a new legal document for a new contract, just write it by copy pasting a bit and talking to colleagues. So kind of Gen AI right now, let's say, reactively helps you talk to this content. But maybe a trend which is now in 2025 is how can I use generative AI at the creation time that, hey, when I write a document, give me like all the information. Now, this is a duplicate of something existing, or this contradicts with something existing. So at the creation time, data stays way cleaner. And this is the thing we are seeing with the clients, that they are looking for these kind of solutions. Of course, they want RAG solutions to talk to the unstructured data, even if they're not organized. But they want tooling also to stop the situation from getting worse.
So this technology help us as well to organize the data at the creation time.
At the creation data for the unstructured data. Of course, then you need proper tooling for governance around this as well.
Cool. Obviously, there is also another area, infrastructure, yes? We've seen a lot of changes last year related to how we build data infrastructure today. Arash, tell us a little bit more what you see out there, what are the biggest trends?
Yeah, you're right, Michal. Actually, there has been some quite a lot of changes in the infrastructure area. We have seen different trends. One of them was companies moving towards more and more towards the cloud-native data warehouses and trying to leverage their scalability, their work isolation and stuff. Also, these sort of cloud-native data warehouses, nowadays they offer separable storage from compute, which is going to be very helpful when it comes to the AI-based workloads. As for the AI-based workloads, you can just on the fly scale your data warehousing solution and therefore deal with the fluctuations in the load when it comes to the model training or model inference. Another trend that we have seen was now companies are looking into and trying to also deploy more data sharing and more data democratization within their organization. For a lot of them, data was just within the silos. Nobody knew what other teams were doing. And now they are trying to kind of remove the IT departments as the gatekeepers, as the bottlenecks that they were, and try to provide this data to almost everyone so that they could use this data for their models and to leverage this data to have better models and have better predictions. And as a result of that, some companies which might have needed, better compliance or more performance with regard to real-time AI, they have also started using some special purpose infrastructures like AI at edge. They put the compute where the data exists, and as a result of that, they can have better performance with, let's say, that with real-time AI, also with the data being in the same place, with the limitation of data movement, they are also addressing the concerns within the compliance region.
Thanks.
Of course.
And also, generative AI applications change a little bit how we build applications in general. Like our technology stacks look completely different than 18 months ago. Maybe open question to you guys, like what do you think are the biggest changes? We hear about vector databases, new frameworks to provide guardrails. What do you see where do you see this trend going? Awesome.
Yeah, so from my perspective, this is the part which is not, let's say, as unified as it can be yet. Still, a lot of different companies, especially if they're in different industries, need different kind of requirements. Let's say if you are a company who are using Gen AI for customer service, towards the end, customers, or like a, let's say B2C. In this case, scaling matters a lot. So you're still going to have like a Kubernetes running with application inside it, which is running LLMs. And if it's at this scale, probably it would be too expensive. For example, that each node would have a GPU running an LLM, so you definitely depend on a service. We have to make your own service. Then the situation becomes different. If you're, let's say, a private bank, maybe you want things on-prem, or partly on cloud, partly on-prem. Then, for example, processing, data and AI next to each other might matter quite a lot for them. What I'm seeing is, depending on the size of the company and the industry they are in, the kind of platforms they use and the kind of application pipeline they use is quite different. What is common among all of them is whether you use open source or proprietary GenAI model, you still need to make a service around them. Whether this service is given to you, or you have to make your own service around them. But doing everything from scratch, your own style, is something which is going obsolete now. So you have to find quite a lot of standardizations which are being baked, and some of it is already out there and following pretty strictly.
I think also, as you mentioned beforehand, we were focusing a lot on the big data warehouse. So there was like this big infrastructure in the middle where we had lots of structured data, usually for reporting, BI, maybe sometimes even operational reasons. Now we see a trend where companies ask us, okay, let's make a platform. So we have a lot of structured data, but there is also the case of, okay, let's use the unstructured data that we have. Lots of PDFs lying around on which we can actually implement those use cases. And beforehand, we didn't really consider them, or they were not used to the fullest extent. Today, we have many cases where we have to have, okay, the standard BI and reporting, but also an advanced analytics that is going to leverage these unstructured data.
Yes. And we see some innovations happening in this space as well. On data platform front, we see, for example, this new interoperable table formats popping up. Iceberg, for example.
Yes.
Can you tell us, like, what does it mean for enterprise today? Does it help us? Like, what are the implications? Or is it harder for us to suddenly start to manage this interconnected data ecosystem?
Yes, it's a very valid question. I think it's somewhere in the middle. So of course it comes with lots of pros. Interoperable format means that you can use, for instance, I will take the example of Iceberg because it's open source, it's getting quite common and widely adopted. By having this format, you can leverage multiple different platforms. So this means that it's easier for you to integrate different data sets coming from various sources, various platforms. But it also means that there is a temptation from the business users to just say, okay, now I have Iceberg files, I will just use another provider than the generic one that we had at my company because it solves this specific problem that I have. So it's going to come with a lot of challenges as well, especially in the selection process and in the proper guidelines setting for platform teams. What it means is that on top of having kind of a governance layer for data, which is essential today, if you don't want to have duplicates, if you want to allow your users to use the data that you have and to use proper data sets, know where to look for the data, we also have to provide guidelines on which platform to use in which use cases, and also limit the temptation from the business to go with platforms that you don't already have.
So, Michel, could you give us some examples from the front lines? Like, what do we see? What type of guidelines we see among our customers? Like, how do they approach this problem?
Yes, I think I have quite an interesting example actually at the customer I'm working with currently. So we were faced with the task of actually building a platform, and we chose to leverage this open file format. The reason is that we want to give them the flexibility of consuming this data from different toolsets. So we use Snowflake as a data warehousing solution there to produce Iceberg tables, and then users from the BI space can use Power BI to actually connect to these Iceberg tables directly, actually not needing to connect to Snowflake and execute queries, but directly sourcing the data from where it's sitting, so an Azure storage in our case. I think it's quite interesting because it opens up an easier infrastructure. You just connect to one place, which is the underlying storage, and then you can plug in multiple use cases. We are also thinking about evolving that a bit beyond just the traditional BI. For instance, with GenAI, we have a need also to tap into structured data. So here, instead of plugging into the warehouse, we will be plugging into the files, therefore being closer to the GenAI application because they are hosted on the same cloud provider. All of this needs to be properly set up in terms of guidelines because obviously giving someone access to the storage means that you give them access to all of the data. So if they have access with their account, they can just plug any tool and access the data. So we need to have
the governance issue.
the governance paradigm, and we need to ensure proper guidelines in terms of platforms, but also access permissioning to avoid having 5 different platforms accessing the same data because it has an implication on costs and governance of tool sets.
Nice, nice. Good. Maybe let's switch gears a little bit. Like we talk a lot about infrastructure, generative AI, but what happened to old, good traditional ML? Where do you see place for old traditional ML techniques? Do they still have a place in enterprise? How our customers approach that today?
Yeah. So maybe last year there was a bit of a, let's say, extra effort to work on LLM-based applications. So everyone was maybe too focused on those and a bit forgot about the value of the classical machine learning. And even if you work on LLMs, I mean, things work until they don't work. And you still need the classical knowledge of NLP, the techniques, have a good understanding to know what's going on. So you can solve the problem. You have to understand the attention mechanism to realize why your, let's say, output generation is impacting the rest of the output you're expecting. And without proper knowledge, you start to miss kind of these points, which means, again, things work until they don't work. So you get like to 80%, but you cannot get beyond that. But let's put aside LLMs for a moment. LLMs cannot do also some things, like they are not good at math, they are not good at executing specific things, and then this is where all of these classical machine learning models were for. If you had some kind of fault prediction, if you had some kind of, let's say, image segmentation, if you had some kind of very specific model to find, let's say, fault in a factory pipeline, these kind of things are not going to be done by LLM because they're quite specific, and LLMs are made to be generic as much as possible. I give you an example. So at Unit8, we built Darts, which is an amazing forecasting library. And we know that forecasting a time series is not something you take lightly. You have to be very careful and very knowledgeable about forecasting to really do a good prediction on, let's say, on sales, on demand, and different kind of things. Now, of course, you can mix this classical ML with LLMs also. So imagine, and this is a tool we are going to introduce soon, is imagine you have an LLM interface that you talk to it, say, hey, we have this database of sales data, and I want to predict, for example, price for the next 2 years, depending on the condition of, for example, client segment being X and Y. Business people are not usually capable of writing those queries or making a model for prediction. But what can happen is you can have proper execution agent, which is running classical machine learning like Darts in case of forecasting, that converts user query to actually parts of execution code. And here we should be careful. We don't want to generate the whole code on the fly. We want to glue together snippets of code and kind of call the execution part correctly. Then it would run classical machine learning, it would train the model, and then it would show the results. Or would use an existing model which is trained by professionals and give the results. Yeah. So I think there is a bridge between LLMs and classical machine learning, but we should remind ourselves again and again. LLMs are made for general public, and they are supposed to do generic things. And of course, with the instructions, you can make them do specific things, but these specific things are not operational, executive, mathematical tasks.
Mm-hmm. So for those reasons, it's sometimes also for higher degree of control.
Yeah.
And quality.
And I think quality would matter a lot. And again, we are seeing the pattern that with our clients, maybe last year, they said, let's pause a bit the classical machine learning projects and focus on just GPT things. But then we see they are coming back because they see, LLM is not solving everything they were looking for.
Sounds good. All right. To conclude this discussion, I'm super curious, like, what are your, what do you get excited when you wake up, and what are your predictions for this year, whenever it comes to data, infra, or AI? Michel?
I think it's a very interesting time. I think we are heading towards a democratization of the lakehouse model. I think it was a lot used as a buzzword in the past. I think it's going to be used much more now with the rise of formats like Apache Iceberg, Delta format, and so on. And I think it's going to simplify the lives of lots of people, both from the engineering side, but also from the business side. I think it's going to open up a lot of possibilities in how you use the data, where you use it. So typically Gen AI, not needing to actually tap into a SQL engine, but just being able to process Parquet files with an Iceberg catalog. So I think it's going to kind of make things easier. And we see that this also gets performant. Our partners and the cloud providers that we use, they provide us with solutions where the performance is almost on par with the internal table format.
Yes.
So this means that there is almost no drawback going there, except for this governance part. It needs to be managed properly, because otherwise it's going to become a mess, and everybody is going to use all sorts of different tools, and the data is going to sit in all sorts of different places.
Yeah.
It's almost as with the data lake a few years ago, as we saw that it could become a data swamp. So we have to avoid these pitfalls.
Good note. Arash?
Yeah, on top of that, what we have also seen with our clients were a little bit of data cataloging, but that needs to get more, because people had this sort of trait that, yes, let's store everything, let's measure everything, let's put everything somewhere in a data lake, and therefore we would have different teams coming up with different projects that were basically kind of talking about the same thing, but coming with different results because their data didn't match together. And with this data democratization and with data cataloging on top of it, you will have a vision on what data exists at the moment, and therefore you can identify if you have a mismatch in the context that the data is talking about from the very source. You should not wait now up until the project is done, up until you have the results, to see that just your results don't match anymore. Mm-hmm. This plus the fact that with a little bit more governance, to have the AI models work on the trusted layer of the data, maybe using its semantic layer on top so that it translates the data to a unified language within the organization, then you could have maybe much better results, and let's say that save the cost, but not by not doing the same thing twice or 3 times.
No rework.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on the Gen AI part, I think there is one thing which is naturally coming, the whole multimodal, it's improving, it's getting better, and it's almost there, or it is there. So this one, adopt, you don't have to do much, just adopt, think about use cases which are multimodal. Then on the thing to be careful about is agentic. So everyone is talking about agentic, and it's a very good idea, and it actually works. You have all these execution engines, but kind of reminds me of the microservice story. It started, and then there was the microservice jungle, and then after it maturized a little bit, then people realized not everything needs to be a mini microservice, and they should have the correct granularity, and some logic should be a little bit, bounded together. So be careful about agentic, go for it, but don't overdo it. And I think the thing to invest on is proactive Gen AI versus reactive Gen AI. Again, trying to create data at source correctly rather than letting everything grow and just acting, when it's there and everything is reactive just to find your answers in the data.
Makes sense. Thank you, guys. Those are some cool predictions, and hope we meet again in a couple months and repeat that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.